Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Ravenhurst. Not Ravenhurst, sorry, The Longing. That's a different series. Today we are going to be continuing to read The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is definitely The Longing, not Ravenhurst. So, let's continue. India is quite different from Yorkshire, Mary said slowly, as she thought the matter over. I never thought of that. Did Dickon and your mother like to hear you talk about me? Why, our Dickon's eyes nearly started out of his head. They got that round, answered Martha. But mother, she was put out about your seeming to be all by yourself like. She said, hasn't Mr. Craven got no governess for her, nor no nurse? And I said, no, he hasn't, though Mrs. Medlock says he will when he thinks of it. But she says he mayn't think of it for 2 or 3 years. I don't want a governess, said Mary sharply. But mother says you ought to be learning your book by this time, and you ought to have a woman to look after you. And she says, now Martha, you just think how you'd feel yourself in a big place like that, wandering about all alone and no mother. You do your best to cheer her up, she says. And I said I would. Mary gave her a long, steady look. You do cheer me up, she said. I like to hear you talk. Presently Martha went out of the room and came back with something held in her hands under her apron. What does thee think? She said, with a cheerful grin. I've brought thee a present. A present? Exclaimed Mistress Mary. How could a cottage full of 14 hungry people give anyone a present? A man was driving across the moor peddling, Martha explained, and he stopped his cart at our door. He had pots and pans and odds and ends, but mother had no money to buy anything. Just as he was going away, our Lisbeth Ellen called out, Mother, he's got skipping ropes with red and blue handles. And mother, she calls out quite sudden, Here, stop, mister. How much are they? And he says, 2pence. And mother, she began fumbling in her pocket, and she says to me, Martha, thou's brought me thy wages like a good lass, and I've got 4 places to put every penny, but I'm just going to take 2pence out of it to buy that child a skipping rope. And she bought one, and here it is. She brought it out from under her apron, and exhibited it quite proudly. It was a strong, slender rope, with a striped red and blue handle at each end. But Mary Lennox had never seen a skipping rope before. She gazed at it with a mystified expression. What is it for? She asked curiously. For? Cried Martha. Does that mean that they've not got skipping ropes in India? For all they've got elephants and tigers and camels? No wonder most of 'em's black. This is what it's for. Just watch me. And she ran into the middle of the room and, taking a handle in each hand, began to skip and skip and skip, while Mary turned in her chair to stare at her. And the queer faces in the old portraits seemed to stare at her too, and wonder what on earth this common little cottager had the impudence to be doing under their very noses. But Martha did not even see them. The interest and curiosity in Mistress Mary's face delighted her, and she went on skipping and counted as she skipped until she had reached 100. I could skip longer than that, she said when she stopped. I've skipped as much as 500 when I was 12. But I wasn't as fat then as I am now, and I was in practice. Mary got up from her chair, beginning to feel excited herself. It looks nice, she said. Your mother is a kind woman. Do you think I could ever skip like that? You just try it, urged Martha, handing her the skipping rope. You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice you'll mount up. That's what mother said. She says, nothing will do her more good than skipping rope. It's the sensiblest toy a child can have. Let her play out in the fresh air skipping, and it'll stretch her legs and arms and give her some strength in them. It was plain that there was not a great deal of strength in Mistress Mary's arms and legs when she first began to skip. She was not very clever at it, but she liked it so much that she did not want to stop. Put on the things and run and skip outdoors, said Martha. Mother said I must tell you to keep out of doors as much as you could, even when it rains a bit, so as they'll wrap up warm. Mary put on her coat and hat and took her skipping rope over her arm. She opened the door to go out, and then suddenly thought of something and turned back rather slowly. "Martha," she said, "they were your wages. It was your 2p, really. Thank you." She said it stiffly because she was not used to thanking people or noticing that they did things for her. "Thank you," she said, and held out her hand because she did not know what else to do. Martha gave her hand a clumsy little shake, as if she was not accustomed to this sort of thing either. Then she laughed. Thou'rt a queer old womanish thing," she said. "If thou'd been our Elizabeth Ellen, thou'd ha' given me a kiss." Mary looked stiffer than ever. "Do you want me to kiss you?" Martha laughed again. "Nay, not me," she answered. "If thou was different, perhaps, thou'd want to thyself, but thou isn't. Run off outside and play with thy rope." Mistress Mary felt a little awkward as she went out of the room. Yorkshire people seemed strange, and Martha was always rather a puzzle to her. At first she had disliked her very much, but now she did not. The skipping rope was a wonderful thing. She counted and skipped and counted, until her cheeks were quite red, and she was more interested than she had ever been since she was born. The sun was shining, and a little wind was blowing, not a rough wind, but one which came in delightful little gusts, and brought a fresh scent of newly turned earth with it. She skipped round the fountain garden, and up one walk and down another. She skipped at last into the kitchen garden and saw Ben Weatherstaff digging and talking to his robin, which was hopping about him. She skipped down the walk toward him, and he lifted his head and looked at her with a curious expression. She had wondered if he would notice her. She wanted him to see her skip. "Well," he exclaimed, "upon my word! Perhaps thou'rt a young un after all, and perhaps there's got child's blood in thy veins instead of sour buttermilk. Thou skipped red into the cheeks as sure as my name's Ben Weatherstaff. I wouldn't have believed they could do it." "I never skipped before," Mary said. "I'm just beginning. I can only go up to 20. "Thou keep on," said Ben. "The shape's well enough at it for a young un that's lived with heathen. Just see how he's watching thee," jerking his head toward the robin. "He followed after thee yesterday. He'll be at it again today. He'll be bound to find out what the skipping rope is. He's never seen one. Shaking his head at the bird, "the curiosity will beat death of thee sometime if thou doesn't look sharp." Mary skipped round all the gardens and round the orchard, resting every few minutes. At length she went to her own special walk, and made up her mind to try if she could skip the whole length of it. It was a good long skip, and she began slowly. But before she had gone halfway down the path, she was so hot and breathless that she was obliged to stop. She did not mind much, because she had already counted up to 30. She stopped with a little laugh of pleasure, and there, lo and behold, was the robin swaying on a branch of ivy. He had followed her, and he greeted her with a chirp. As Mary had skipped toward him, she felt something heavy in her pocket strike against her at each jump, and when she saw the robin she laughed again. "You showed me where the key was yesterday," she said. "You ought to show me the door today. But I don't believe you know." The robin flew away from his swinging spray of ivy on to the top of the wall, and he opened his beak and sang aloud, lovely trill, merely to show off. Nothing in the world is quite as adorably lovely as a robin when he shows off, and they are nearly always doing it. Mary Lennox had heard a great deal about magic in her Ayah's stories, and she always said that what happened most at that moment was magic. One of the nice little gusts of wind rushed down the walk, and it was a stronger one than the rest. It was strong enough to wave the branches of the trees, and it was more than strong enough to sway the trailing sprays of untrimmed ivy hanging from the wall. Mary had stepped close to the robin, and suddenly the gust of wind swung aside some loose ivy trails, and more suddenly still she jumped toward it and caught it in her hand. This she did because she had seen something under it, a round knob, which had been covered by the leaves hanging over it. It was the knob of a door. And with that we come to the end of the episode. So I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.